The mysterious island. The storm beyond the horizon. The Atlantic Ocean had always carried stories. Some were written by sailors who survived impossible storms. Others lived only in whispered legends passed from one generation to the next. Stories about ships that vanished beneath calm skies, strange lights dancing over empty waters, and islands that appeared only when the sea decided they should. Most people dismissed those tales. Ethan Carter never did. At 38, Ethan had spent nearly half his life chasing forgotten places. Not because he believed every legend, but because history had taught him a simple lesson. Every myth begins with a single unexplained truth. His small research vessel, the Aurora, cut steadily through the calm blue water as morning sunlight painted golden reflections across the ocean. The weather forecast promised clear skies for the next 3 days. Perfect conditions. The gentle hum of the diesel engine mixed with the rhythmic sound of waves brushing against the hull. Seabirds circled lazily overhead before disappearing toward the distant coastline that now existed only as a thin gray line behind him. For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt completely at peace. No interviews, no university meetings, no endless debates with professors who believed every mystery could be solved by reading old books from comfortable offices. Out here, answers waited beneath real skies. Inside the compact cabin, maps covered nearly every available surface. Some were modern satellite charts. Others were faded copies of naval records dating back more than 2 centuries. One particular map lay unfolded on the navigation table. It had arrived only 6 weeks earlier inside an anonymous package. No return address, no explanation. Only a single sentence typed neatly across a blank sheet of paper. Some places choose who finds them. At first, Ethan assumed it was another prank. His articles about forgotten civilizations had earned him both admiration and criticism. Anonymous messages were hardly unusual, but the map itself changed everything. Its paper was undeniably old. The ink had faded unevenly with time. Along the lower corner rested a seal belonging to a 19th century British survey expedition that officially disappeared in 1847. Historians knew the expedition had vanished. No one knew why or where. Ethan had spent weeks verifying every detail. The handwriting matched archived journals. The compass markings reflected navigation methods rarely seen after the mid-1800s. Even the paper fibers were consistent with materials manufactured nearly 200 years ago. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths, or the map was genuine. Neither possibility allowed him to ignore it. He traced one finger along the faded route drawn across the Atlantic until it ended near a blank stretch of ocean. Nothing should have existed there. Modern satellite images showed only open water. Yet someone long ago had carefully sketched a small island. Beside it appeared 2 handwritten words. No return. Ethan smiled quietly, not because the warning frightened him, because history often exaggerated danger to protect places people failed to understand. Outside, the wind shifted almost imperceptibly. He barely noticed. Instead, he reached for a weathered leather journal resting beside the map. Its pages contained years of observations collected during expeditions around the world. He turned to a fresh page. Day 1. Coordinates approaching target area. Sea conditions excellent. Visibility unlimited. No unusual activity observed. He paused before adding one final sentence. Legends rarely survive for centuries without leaving something behind. Closing the journal, Ethan stepped back onto the deck. The air smelled different now. Still fresh, still salty, but heavier somehow. A fisherman once told him that the ocean always whispered before changing its mood. Looking across the horizon, Ethan noticed something unusual. Far ahead, a thin gray line, At first glance, it resembled ordinary morning haze, yet it remained perfectly still while the surrounding clouds drifted slowly eastward. Curious, he lifted a pair of binoculars. Nothing, only empty water. He lowered them again. The gray line remained. Strange. His instruments showed stable air pressure. Wind speed remained gentle. Wave height barely exceeded 2 feet. Every reading suggested perfect weather. Yet instinct quietly disagreed. The sea had become unusually silent. Minutes earlier, seabirds filled the sky. Now, none remained. Even the gulls had vanished. Ethan leaned against the railing, listening. The engine continued its steady rhythm. Water flowed calmly beneath the hull. But another sound had disappeared. The ocean itself. Normally, countless tiny waves slapped softly against the boat. Now the surface seemed almost still, as if the sea were holding its breath. A cool breeze brushed across his face, then another, this one colder. He glanced upward. The brilliant blue sky had begun fading into pale silver. Clouds gathered with unsettling speed, not from one direction, from every direction. Within minutes, sunlight dimmed beneath a growing blanket of gray. Ethan checked the weather radar. Empty. Impossible. He recalibrated the display. Still nothing. No storm cells. No approaching front. No explanation. A faint crackle interrupted the silence. The radio. He turned the volume higher. Static. Only static. He adjusted frequencies one after another. Nothing. Not even distant shipping traffic. For hundreds of miles across one of the world's busiest oceans. Silence. His heartbeat slowed. Not from fear, from focus. Experience had taught him that panic blurred details. Observation revealed them. The compass needle trembled, just once, then settled. A few seconds later, and on it trembled again. Longer this time. Ethan frowned. Modern digital navigation remained stable. But the old brass compass mounted beside the wheel continued vibrating ever so slightly, as though uncertain where north belonged. The first drop of rain landed on the back of his hand. He looked up. Dark clouds now covered every inch of sky. The transformation had taken less than 10 minutes. Another drop, then another. The calm ocean slowly darkened beneath shifting shadows. Far beyond the horizon, something moved. Not a ship, not a wave, something much larger, almost impossible to define against the growing darkness. Ethan raised the binoculars once more, for just a heartbeat. He thought he saw towering cliffs. Then they vanished behind curtains of mist. His pulse quickened. There should have been nothing there, absolutely nothing. A deep rumble echoed across the Atlantic, not thunder. It sounded older, lower, like the distant groan of an ancient mountain waking beneath the sea. The wind strengthened. The first real waves struck the hull. The deck creaked softly beneath his boots. Ethan secured the journal inside the cabin before returning outside. Rain now fell steadily. Visibility dropped. The mysterious gray wall ahead continued growing larger. Whatever it wasn't moving toward him, he was moving toward it. Without warning, every navigation screen inside the cabin flickered. The GPS coordinates disappeared. The radar went black. Even the digital clock reset itself to 00. Only the old brass compass remained alive. Its needle spun wildly in endless circles. Ethan stared into the thickening mist ahead. Somewhere beyond it, something waited. And for the first time since leaving shore, he began to wonder whether the anonymous note had been a warning or an invitation. The island appears rain fell harder with every passing minute. The ocean that had been calm only moments ago now rolled beneath the aurora in long, powerful swells. They were not violent enough to threaten the vessel, but they carried an unnatural rhythm as though the sea itself had begun breathing. Ethan Carter tightened his grip on the wheel. Every navigation system remained dead. The GPS displayed only a blank screen. The radar refused to restart. Even his satellite compass had frozen, its digital heading locked on a direction he knew could not be correct. Only the old brass compass continued moving. Its needle spun faster and faster before suddenly stopping. North, south, east, west, none of them. The needle pointed somewhere entirely impossible. Straight ahead. Ethan frowned. Compasses did not choose destinations. They followed magnetic fields. Yet this one seemed to be pointing towards something hidden inside the growing curtain of mist. Another deep rumble echoed beneath the water. The sound vibrated through the hull and into Ethan's boots. He looked over the railing. The sea below had changed color. Instead of the deep blue of the Atlantic, it had become an almost black shade of emerald, reflecting neither the clouds nor the rain. Tiny circles spread across its surface, not from raindrops, from beneath, as though countless unseen bubbles were rising from the depths. For a brief moment, Ethan considered turning back. Every instinct told him that something was terribly wrong. But another part of him, the part that had dedicated his life to forgotten histories and impossible places, refused to retreat. If the mysterious map was authentic, if this storm truly marked the location of the vanished expedition, then history waited somewhere ahead. He reduced the engine speed. There was no reason to rush into whatever lay inside the fog. The mist swallowed sound. The steady engine became strangely distant.
Even the rain seemed quieter. Visibility shrank to less than 50 feet. Gray surrounded him in every direction. Sky, sea, horizon. Everything blended into one endless veil. Time itself felt uncertain. 5 minutes might have passed. Perhaps 20. Without sunlight or instruments, Ethan had no way of knowing. Then, something appeared. At first, it was only a shadow. A darker shape hidden inside lighter fog. He blinked. It disappeared, then slowly returned. Not moving. Waiting. His heartbeat quickened. He reached for the binoculars before realizing they were useless in the dense mist. Instead, he slowed the boat even further. The shadow became clearer. Vertical. Massive. Stone. A cliff. It rose silently from the ocean like the wall of an ancient fortress. Its surface was covered in thick green moss and countless vines that hung almost to the water. No lighthouse. No harbor. No signs of human construction. Only rock, towering and impossibly steep. Ethan stared in disbelief. According to every modern chart, this island did not exist. The cliff stretched beyond both sides of the mist, disappearing into the gray distance. It looked less like a normal island and more like the outer wall of an enormous hidden world. The rain suddenly stopped. Not gradually. Instantly. 1 second rain hammered the deck. The next, silence. Ethan looked behind him. Beyond the stern, rain continued falling heavily over the open ocean. Ahead, not a single drop. The invisible boundary between storm and calm passed directly through his boat. He had never seen anything like it. Slowly, the aurora crossed that invisible line. The sea became perfectly still. The air warmed. Sunlight broke through the clouds overhead. Ethan turned around. Behind him, the storm remained exactly where it had been. Dark clouds circled the island like a giant ring, separating it from the outside world. Inside that ring, blue sky, gentle wind, birdsong.
It was as if two entirely different worlds existed only a few hundred yards apart. He switched on the radio again. Nothing. Only static. His satellite phone searched endlessly for a signal. None. The island seemed completely cut off from the rest of civilization. A flock of white seabirds glided gracefully along the cliffs. Unlike the birds outside the storm, these showed no fear. Several perched on narrow ledges, watching the small research vessel without making a sound. Ethan guided the Aurora along the rocky shoreline. The cliffs continued for nearly a mile before finally opening into a narrow passage. It was easy to miss. From a distance it looked like nothing more than a crack in the stone. But as the boat approached, Ethan realized it was a natural channel leading inland. The entrance was barely wide enough for a single vessel. Dark rock walls rose on both sides. Crystal clear water reflected the sunlight like polished glass. He hesitated. The passage looked inviting. Almost welcoming. Yet something about it felt deliberate. As if nature had carefully hidden the entrance from anyone sailing past the island. Taking a slow breath, Ethan guided the Aurora into the channel. The engine echoed softly between the cliffs. Every sound seemed magnified. Water dripped from overhanging vines. Small waterfalls trickled down smooth stone walls. Bright green ferns covered nearly every surface. The deeper he traveled, the more beautiful the island became. After several minutes, the narrow passage widened unexpectedly. Ethan's eyes widened. A hidden lagoon. Perfectly sheltered. The water shimmered in shades of turquoise and emerald. Palm trees swayed gently along a white sandy beach. Wildflowers covered the surrounding hills in colors so vibrant they almost looked unreal. A small waterfall poured into the lagoon from a cliff overlooking the bay. The place was breathtaking. Peaceful. Untouched. He slowly shut down the engine. Silence settled over the lagoon. Not uncomfortable silence. The kind found only in places where humans had rarely walked. Ethan dropped the anchor. For several moments, he simply stood there. Looking. Listening. Trying to understand what he had found. Then he noticed something impossible. Near the edge of the beach. A wooden dock. Old. Weathered. Partially collapsed. Yet unmistakably built by human hands. His pulse quickened. Someone had once lived here. Or visited. He picked up the binoculars. Beyond the dock, faint shapes rested beneath vines and tropical plants. Straight lines. Wooden beams. Stone walls. The remains of buildings. Nature had almost reclaimed them. Almost. Ethan smiled despite himself. The island wasn't empty. History was here. Waiting patiently beneath decades of silence. He packed only the essentials into his canvas backpack. A flashlight. His journal. A camera. Fresh batteries. A compass. A small first aid kit. A canteen. And the mysterious map. Before leaving the boat, he looked back toward the entrance. The storm still surrounded the island in the distance like a giant circular wall. No ships. No airplanes. No signs that the outside world even knew this place existed. He stepped onto the old dock. The wood creaked beneath his boots but held firm. Warm sunlight filtered through towering trees, carrying the scent of salt, damp earth, and unfamiliar flowers. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead. Somewhere deep inside the forest. A single bell rang. Clear. Soft. Only once. Ethan froze. Then listened. Nothing. No second bell. No footsteps. No voices. Only birds singing high in the trees. He slowly turned toward the jungle. A narrow stone path, nearly hidden beneath grass and moss, disappeared into the dense forest. It seemed to be waiting for him. Ethan adjusted the straps of his backpack. Took one steady breath. And began walking toward the ancient path. Unaware that, from the shadow of the trees, unseen eyes had already begun watching every step he took. Footprints in the sand. Morning sunlight filtered gently through the towering trees, painting soft golden patterns across the ancient stone path. Ethan Carter walked slowly, allowing every sense to adjust to the strange silence surrounding him. The forest was alive. Birds called from the high canopy. Leaves whispered softly whenever the breeze passed through them. Somewhere nearby, fresh water flowed over smooth rocks. Yet despite all those sounds, the island felt quiet. Not empty. Watchful. The narrow trail beneath his boots had clearly been built by skilled hands long ago. Large stone slabs formed an even walkway through the dense jungle, though countless years of moss, roots, and fallen leaves had hidden much of its original shape. Nature had reclaimed almost everything. Almost. Ethan knelt beside one section of the path where several stones remained exposed. Carefully brushing away loose dirt, he discovered shallow carvings running along their edges. Simple geometric patterns. Circles. Stars. Flowing waves. Nothing that resembled a language he recognized. He photographed each one before continuing. As the path climbed gently uphill, the vegetation began to change. Towering palms gave way to enormous hardwood trees whose trunks were wider than small cottages. Their branches stretched so high above that patches of blue sky appeared only in scattered openings. Sunlight drifted down in soft beams filled with floating dust and tiny insects. Everything seemed peaceful. Perhaps too peaceful. He hadn't seen a single large animal since stepping onto the island. No monkeys. No deer. Not even small reptiles basking on warm stones. Only birds. Always birds. After nearly half an hour of walking, the forest suddenly opened. Before him stretched a wide beach hidden inside the island itself. Fine white sand curved gracefully around a quiet bay where gentle waves lapped against the shore. Crystal clear water revealed colorful fish gliding effortlessly through the shallows. The scene looked untouched. Like a forgotten paradise. Ethan smiled. Then stopped. There, near the water's edge. Footprints. Fresh. He crouched immediately. The impressions were unmistakably human. Bare feet. Adult-sized. Each print remained sharply defined in the damp sand. They had been made recently. Very recently. He examined them carefully. The stride appeared relaxed. No signs of running. No dragging marks. Whoever had walked here had not been frightened. They had simply been strolling along the shoreline. Ethan followed the trail with growing curiosity. It continued for nearly 50 yards before turning toward the forest. Then, it vanished. Not faded. Not washed away. Simply ended. The final footprint lay perfectly preserved. Beyond it, smooth, untouched sand. Ethan frowned. He searched the surrounding area. No second trail. No return path. Nothing. It was as though the person had taken one final step. And disappeared. A cool breeze drifted across the beach. For reasons he couldn't explain, the hairs on his arms stood up. He looked around. The beach remained empty. The water sparkled peacefully beneath the morning sun. Birds continued flying overhead. Everything appeared perfectly normal. Yet he could not shake the feeling that someone stood just beyond sight. Watching. Waiting. Ethan forced himself to remain calm.
They continued along the trail before disappearing once again. Exactly as before. One final footprint, then nothing. No leaves disturbed, no broken branches, no second trail leading away. Only empty ground. "This is impossible," Ethan whispered. A voice answered from somewhere behind him. "Many things appear impossible until they're understood." Ethan spun around. The bridge stood empty. The voice had sounded calm, gentle, old, The same elderly voice from the cottage. "Who's there?" Ethan called. A long silence followed. Then, the island reveals itself slowly. The words drifted through the forest without any clear direction. They seemed to come from everywhere at once. Ethan searched desperately with his flashlight. Every tree, every shadow, nothing. Only darkness. Then he noticed something unusual beside the trail. A stone pillar rose from the ground, nearly hidden beneath vines. Its surface had been carved with dozens of strange symbols similar to those he'd discovered earlier along the ancient pathway. Near the top rested a small bronze plaque. Unlike the symbols, its inscription was written in perfect English. "Only those who seek without greed may pass beyond this point." Below the inscription appeared a date, 1847, the same year the British survey expedition had vanished. Ethan photographed the pillar from every angle. As he lowered the camera, he realized something else. The forest had fallen completely silent. No owls, no insects, no wind, absolute stillness. Then came the sound. Tick, 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 like the steady movement of an old grandfather clock. The sound echoed faintly somewhere deeper within the trees. Curious, Ethan followed it. The ticking grew louder, more distinct. Eventually, the trail ended in a small clearing. Moonlight illuminated an enormous oak tree standing alone at its center. Its trunk was wider than a small house. Its branches stretched across nearly the entire clearing. Embedded within the ancient bark was a clock, a real clock. Its polished brass face remained remarkably untouched by time. Its hands moved steadily. Tick, tick, tick. Yet there were no numbers. Only 12 carved symbols matching those on the stone pillar. No visible gears, no pendulum. Nothing explaining how it continued operating after nearly 2 centuries. Ethan stepped closer. The hands suddenly stopped. Midnight. A deep bell rang once from somewhere high in the mountains. The sound rolled across the island like distant thunder. Then the clock began moving backward, slowly. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3. Every hair on Ethan's arm stood upright. He wasn't witnessing a broken mechanism. He was watching time reverse. Behind him, leaves crunched softly. Someone had entered the clearing. Ethan turned. Standing at the edge of the moonlight was the elderly man from the mirror, exactly as he'd seen him before. Long silver hair, weathered face, dark coat reaching almost to the ground. His eyes reflected the moonlight with quiet intelligence. For several moments, neither man spoke. Then the old stranger smiled gently. "Welcome," he said. "You finally found the first door. The keeper's cabin." For several long seconds, neither man moved. Moonlight filtered through the towering branches of the ancient oak, casting pale patterns across the clearing. Behind Ethan, the mysterious clock had stopped moving backward. Its hands rested silently, pointing to symbols he still couldn't understand. The elderly stranger stood with remarkable calm. He appeared to be somewhere in his 70s, perhaps older. His silver hair reached his shoulders, and his neatly trimmed beard framed a weathered face marked by countless years beneath the sun. His dark coat looked old-fashioned, though carefully maintained. Most unusual were his eyes. They carried neither suspicion nor surprise, only recognition. "As I said," the old man repeated softly, "welcome." Ethan lowered his flashlight. "I know you," he said cautiously. The old man smiled. "No. You were in the mirror?" "I was. You spoke outside the village." "Yes. And you know my name?" "I do." A gentle breeze stirred the leaves overhead. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "Who are you?" The old man looked toward the enormous oak tree before answering. "My name is Samuel." He paused. Most people who once lived here called me the Keeper. The Keeper of what? Samuel's faint smile returned. That depends on who's asking. Ethan crossed his arms. I've crossed an impossible storm, found an island that doesn't exist, discovered an abandoned village, and someone keeps whispering my name. He took another step forward. I think I've earned a few straight answers. Samuel laughed quietly. The sound carried no mockery, only patience. Every visitor says exactly that. Visitor? You are not the first person to arrive. Ethan's heart skipped. The British expedition. Samuel nodded once. They came and disappeared. They chose to stay. Ethan stared at him. No one chooses to disappear from history. Samuel turned and began walking along a narrow trail that continued beyond the clearing. They do, he replied calmly, when history outside becomes less important than the life they discover here. Without another word, he continued into the forest. After a brief hesitation, Ethan followed. The trail climbed steadily through ancient trees. Moonlight gave way to warm golden lanterns hanging from wooden posts. Unlike the abandoned village, these lanterns were lit. Fresh oil burned inside them. Someone maintained them. You live here alone? Ethan asked. Samuel nodded. For many years. How many? The old man smiled without answering. The silence itself felt like a response. After nearly 20 minutes, the forest opened onto a rocky hillside. Nestled against the base of a cliff stood a small wooden cabin. Warm light glowed through its windows. Thin smoke drifted peacefully from a stone chimney. The sight stopped Ethan in his tracks. For the first time since arriving, he was looking at a home that was clearly inhabited. Flower boxes rested beneath the windows. Fresh herbs grew beside the front steps. Firewood had been stacked neatly beneath a covered shelter. Everything was tidy. Everything was cared for. Samuel climbed the porch steps. You've traveled a long way. I have. You must be hungry. Only then did Ethan realize how long it had been since breakfast. Samuel opened the door. Come inside. The cabin felt warm and welcoming. Shelves filled with hundreds of books covered one wall. Maps occupied another. A large stone fireplace crackled gently near the center of the room. Copper pots hung above a spotless kitchen. Nothing appeared mysterious, nothing supernatural. It looked like the home of a scholar who had quietly lived in the wilderness for decades. Samuel placed a kettle above the fire. Tea, please. While the water heated, Ethan's attention wandered toward the bookshelves. Most volumes were extraordinarily old. Leather bindings, handwritten labels, several languages: Latin, French, Spanish, Arabic, English. One title immediately caught his eye. Journal of the Atlantic Survey, 1847. He reached toward it. Samuel spoke without turning around. You may read it tomorrow. Ethan withdrew his hand. You knew which book I wanted. I've watched enough people enter this room. Samuel poured 2 steaming cups of tea and motioned toward a small wooden table beside the fireplace. The drink carried a pleasant scent Ethan couldn't identify. It tasted surprisingly refreshing, neither bitter nor sweet. What is it? A plant found only on this island. They sat quietly for a while. The fire crackled softly. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. Finally, Ethan asked the question that had occupied his thoughts since arriving. Why does this island appear on no map? Samuel stared into the flames. Because it prefers not to be found. Islands don't make choices. Most don't. Again, not quite an answer. Ethan leaned forward. I deal in evidence. So do I. Then explain the storm. Samuel nodded thoughtfully. The storm protects the island. How? It always has. Naturally, the keeper smiled. Does the answer matter if the result is the same? Ethan sighed. You enjoy riddles. I enjoy patience. The room fell quiet again. After several moments, Samuel stood and walked toward an old wooden cabinet. From its top drawer, he removed a folded piece of yellowed paper. Without a word, he handed it to Ethan. Carefully unfolding it, Ethan immediately recognized the handwriting. It matched the anonymous note that had arrived with the mysterious map weeks earlier. His pulse quickened. You sent this? I did. You invited me? Yes. Why me? Samuel studied him for a long moment. Because you still ask questions for the right reasons. Ethan looked up. The right reasons? You seek understanding. Samuel folded his hands. Not wealth. Not fame. Not power. You spent your life preserving forgotten histories instead of exploiting them. He smiled gently. That matters here. Ethan stared silently at the paper. Dozens of new questions crowded his mind. Before he could ask another, a heavy thud echoed outside. Both men looked toward the door. Another thud, louder this time, not a knock. Something striking the porch. Samuel's expression changed for the first time. His calm smile disappeared. He stood immediately. Without speaking, he walked to the window and looked outside. What is it? Ethan asked. Samuel remained silent. Then he quietly drew the curtain closed. Stay inside. Another impact shook the front steps. Slow, heavy, as if something extremely large had climbed onto the porch. Ethan instinctively stood. Samuel raised one hand. No. The old man's voice had become unusually serious. Whatever you hear, do not open that door. Outside, a deep, slow breath echoed through the night.
After the terrifying footsteps outside the cabin faded into the night, an uneasy silence filled the room. Ethan, still shaken, asked Samuel what kind of creature had circled the cabin. To Ethan's surprise, Samuel admitted that even after living on the island for decades, he had never seen the creature clearly. He had only witnessed its shadow, heard its footsteps, and found its enormous tracks. According to Samuel, the island held mysteries that belonged not only to nature but also to history, and the line between the two was often impossible to distinguish. Realizing that Ethan was ready to learn the truth, Samuel retrieved a small wooden box hidden behind a shelf. Inside lay an ancient brass key unlike any ordinary key. Its handle was shaped as a compass rose, and delicate wave patterns were engraved along its shaft. Samuel explained that the key unlocked a place very few people had ever seen. The following morning, they would begin a journey to the oldest location on the island. At sunrise, they packed lanterns, ropes, and the mysterious key before heading deep into an untouched part of the forest. Towering ancient trees surrounded them, creating an atmosphere that felt almost sacred. After hours of hiking, the forest suddenly opened onto breathtaking cliffs overlooking a perfectly clear inland lake. Ethan was astonished. The lake was not marked on any map he had studied. As he looked beneath the crystal-clear surface, his amazement turned into disbelief. An entire stone city rested beneath the water. Streets, buildings, bridges, statues, towers, and marketplaces remained perfectly preserved, as though the city had been submerged overnight without suffering any destruction. Colorful fish swam peacefully through empty windows while aquatic plants drifted gently around ancient monuments. Samuel calmly revealed that the lake had not always existed, but no one knew exactly what had caused the city to disappear beneath the water. Discovering new details beneath the surface, grand staircases, fountains, wide avenues, and magnificent architecture frozen beneath the water. When they finally reached the center of the submerged city, Samuel stopped rowing. Directly below them stood an enormous domed structure unlike any other building. At the very top of the dome rested a massive bronze door. Confused, Ethan wondered why a door had been built on the roof. Samuel explained that the structure had never been designed to lie beneath a lake. He then pointed toward the door and revealed that it was their destination. Before Ethan could fully process what he had heard, strange ripples spread across the otherwise motionless lake. Looking down, he saw an enormous shadow gliding silently between the ancient buildings. The creature was far larger than their small boat and was swimming directly toward them. Moments later, the shadow disappeared without a trace, leaving Ethan uncertain whether he had imagined it. Samuel led Ethan across a series of perfectly arranged white stones rising just above the water's surface. The stones formed a narrow path leading directly to the bronze door. Unlike ordinary doors, it had no handle, only a single keyhole decorated with intricate carvings of stars, waves, and a compass rose. Samuel handed Ethan the brass key, insisting that he should be the one to unlock it. Though hesitant, Ethan inserted the key. A deep metallic click echoed beneath the lake as the carvings shimmered softly. The massive door slowly swung open. Instead of water flooding inside, a completely dry stone staircase stretched downward into darkness. It seemed impossible. Surrounded by thousands of tons of water, the entrance remained perfectly dry. Carrying lanterns, the two descended the staircase until they reached an enormous circular chamber hidden beneath the lake. What awaited them left Ethan speechless. Thousands upon thousands of books filled towering shelves that reached from floor to ceiling. Ancient scrolls, journals, maps, and manuscripts from every corner of the world rested in perfect condition. Not a single book showed signs of age, dust, or decay despite centuries having passed. Above them, the transparent dome allowed sunlight to filter into the chamber while fish drifted peacefully overhead, creating one of the most breathtaking sights Ethan had ever witnessed. The collection contained books written in English, Arabic, Latin, French, Chinese, and many other languages. Ethan opened an old expedition journal dated 1847 and realized that countless lost expeditions had documented their discoveries before disappearing from history. Samuel quietly explained that the island did not protect treasure, it protected knowledge. Everything the outside world lost or forgot eventually found its way into this hidden library. At the center of the chamber stood a mysterious globe carved with hundreds of glowing stars instead of continents or oceans. Samuel explained that the builders of this place had never intended to hide wealth. They had built the library to preserve humanity's memory before it could be erased by time. As Ethan explored further, he noticed that not every journal was ancient. Some were surprisingly modern. One diary ended with an entry dated May 14, 2011, proving that people had visited the island in recent years. When Ethan questioned why none of them had returned, Samuel simply replied that some visitors discovered they no longer wished to leave. Then Ethan noticed something that froze him in place. Inside a glass display case rested a weathered leather notebook marked with the initials DC. His own initials. Although he had never seen the notebook before, it felt strangely familiar. When he asked Samuel who it belonged to, the old keeper gave an unsettling answer. He had hoped Ethan himself could explain it.